The grand palace of Zoria shimmered under the twin suns, its towers reaching high into the thin, glittering atmosphere. Every surface reflected light in patterns that seemed almost alive, shifting like the thoughts of the rulers who lived inside. Princess Lysera moved quickly along one of the quieter corridors, her long robes brushing against polished floors. She had always been trained to follow rules, to respect hierarchy, and to obey her mother, the queen, without question. But today, something was different. The message she had received that morning was strange, cryptic, and urgent. It made her heart beat faster and her thoughts race. Her mission, simple in theory, had become complicated in ways she could not yet understand. The princess carried herself with care, but in her distraction, she failed to notice the corridor splitting into different wings. One side led to the ambassadorial chambers, where allies from across the galaxy waited. The other led to a restricted section of the palace that no outsider, not even a royal, normally entered. Lysera's curiosity was her undoing. She paused at a nondescript door, wondering if this might hold the answers she sought. Her fingers hesitated over the door's control panel. A voice in her mind reminded her of protocol, of danger, and of her duty. But the mysterious message whispered insistently that the solution lay somewhere unexpected. She knocked lightly, almost hesitantly. Inside, Corporal Jax Rylan was having a rare moment of peace. The human soldier had been stationed at Zoria for nearly a year as a liaison and security consultant, a role humans often held because their adaptability and unpredictability were highly valued in interstellar diplomacy. Jax's quarters were small but comfortable, a mix of human practicality and alien technology. He had been reviewing mission reports and recalibrating his equipment when the knock interrupted him. Humans were not expected here to be startled by anything, but there was something unusual in the rhythm of the knock. He approached the door, fingers brushing the sidearm he never liked to wear but always kept close. When he opened it, he froze, though he wouldn't have admitted it even to himself. Before him stood a figure of elegance and authority. Her robes glimmered with a soft metallic sheen, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed a mind always alert. Princess Lysera looked surprised to find a human at the door, but quickly recovered her composure. "I'd apologize," she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of urgency. "I was told someone here could help me." "You're not supposed to," he cut himself off, seeing the look in her eyes. There was more at stake here than a simple trespass. Lysera hesitated, weighing her words. Humans were famous for bluntness, and this one seemed no exception. "I need information," she said carefully. "Something critical to the stability of the Empire." "I don't have time to explain fully." "All right," he said. "Come in, but you better start talking." "I've been given this," she said, pulling a small device from her sleeve. It glowed faintly, a complex network of circuits visible beneath its translucent casing. She handed it to Jax. "It's important. It must not fall into the wrong hands." Lysera shook her head. "I know it's part of a plan that could destabilize the Empire if misused. My mother entrusted me with this information, but I don't know who I can trust. That's why I am here." Humans have a way of seeing patterns others miss. I've learned to think outside the rules when necessary. We might just stand a chance. "Something unpredictable," she nodded once decisively. "Then we must act quickly." Jax led her through a series of maintenance passages that only a human trained in improvisation could navigate efficiently. Aliens relied on their advanced sensors, their AIs, and their predictable movements. Jax relied on timing, intuition, and the ability to act in ways no algorithm could anticipate. As they moved, Lysera couldn't help but observe. Humans were remarkable in their resourcefulness, in their ability to adapt, and in the way they faced danger without overthinking every possible outcome. Jax ducked under a security beam, then signaled her to follow. "You move like this, not like the palace expects," he explained. "They'll look for someone following the usual rules. We break the pattern, we stay invisible." For a moment, the beauty of the scene contrasted sharply with the urgency of their mission. Lysera realized that the palace she had known her entire life, a place of order and tradition, was not impenetrable. A human soldier could move in ways that its defenders could never anticipate. Once clear, they reached a small shuttle hidden among palace service vehicles. Jax had acquired it months before, an unassuming craft that could evade standard tracking. He guided Lysera aboard, taking the controls with ease. "Destination?" he asked. Lysera thought for a moment. Somewhere safe, somewhere neutral. I need time to understand this device and what it truly represents. As the palace disappeared behind them, Lysera felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she was outside the confines of expectation, guided not by protocol, but by someone she barely knew and someone human. Hours passed in the silence of hyperspace, each occupied with their own thoughts. Lysera stared at the small device, its circuits pulsing faintly. "Do you think it's dangerous?" she asked finally. Jax looked over, calm and measured. "Everything in this galaxy can be dangerous in the wrong hands, but humans have a way of turning danger into opportunity. We improvise, we adapt, we fight smart, not just hard." Now, floating in the void with a human soldier who acted in ways she could barely predict, she began to see a new path. The galaxy was larger, stranger, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But it was also full of possibilities. As they approached their destination, a small neutral station on the edge of Imperial space, Lysera knew this was only the beginning. The device she carried was a key and the galaxy was a lock. But she also knew she was not alone. A human stood beside her, unpredictable, clever, and courageous. Together they could face dangers no one else could navigate. Jax piloted the shuttle into the station, docking quietly among traders, smugglers, and diplomats of every species. The station was alive with activity, a chaotic symphony that no AI could fully predict. Here humans thrived. Here the unpredictable was an advantage. Lysera stepped out of the shuttle, her gaze scanning the crowd. Every face was an unknown. Every movement could be friend or foe. But for the first time, she felt not fear, but purpose. She turned to Jax, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Welcome to the real galaxy," he said simply. "This is where we start making a difference." The neutral station hummed with life, a constant background of chatter, engine vibrations, and the occasional call of alien traders. Princess Lysera followed Jax through the crowded corridors, her eyes scanning every figure with cautious curiosity. Humans were not the dominant species in this part of the galaxy. Most beings assumed that alien technology, strict hierarchies, and centuries of tradition made them smarter, faster, or stronger than humans. But Jax carried himself with a confidence that demanded respect, and Lysera was quickly beginning to understand why. He led her to a small room tucked away near the outer docking bays, a place he had chosen because it was quiet and hard to monitor. The room was sparsely furnished but functional. Holoscreens flickered on the walls, displaying maps, data streams, and a series of encrypted transmissions. Lysera felt a pang of nervousness. She had never seen technology used in this way, so practical, so human. Jax moved with purpose, scanning the readings and checking the device she had brought from the palace. "This," he said, holding the device carefully, "is more than a simple communication tool. It's part of a larger plan, a network the palace doesn't want anyone to know about, and they would do anything to keep it hidden. But humans have a way of seeing patterns others miss. We notice connections that others consider irrelevant. I can tell that this device can control, or at least influence, some of the Empire's AI systems. That's dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands, the palace could lose control entirely." For the first time, she realized that her world, the world she had been raised to protect, was fragile. The Empire, with all its power and technology, was not infallible, and she had placed herself in the hands of a human soldier, someone whose methods were unconventional, unpredictable, and effective. Jax studied the device, his fingers moving over its surface as if reading it through touch. "I need to see how it interacts with the palace systems," he said. "But to do that, we'll have to get closer without being noticed. The palace has eyes everywhere. We find gaps, weaknesses, blind spots. The Empire relies on predictability. We rely on ingenuity." Jax thrived in the unexpected. Over the next few hours, they worked together, examining the device and running simulations. Jax's approach was methodical but creative. While Lysera followed protocols and checked for safety, he pushed boundaries, testing ideas, trying combinations that no one in the Empire would consider. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The device was not just a tool, it was a key. A key to bypassing certain AI-controlled sectors of the Empire. It could open doors, reveal hidden information, and possibly prevent a disaster. But the discovery came with a new threat. Jax noticed a trace in the device's transmissions, a silent alert sent to the palace security systems. "They know it's missing," he said quietly. "Somebody has already started tracking it. We have to move, and we have to move fast. Humans, aliens, even AIs who are willing to question orders, they all have a role." That's where I've seen change happen. Their first encounter was with a human engineer named Mara, who had been stranded on the station after a failed supply mission. She was clever, resourceful, and familiar with alien technology in ways few humans could match. Jax introduced her to Lysera, explaining the situation without revealing all the details. Mara listened carefully, her sharp mind quickly piecing together the stakes. "If what you're saying is true," she said, "then the palace is vulnerable in ways they never imagined, and you, Princess, are walking right into the middle of it. Then let's make sure we don't get caught. If this device is activated incorrectly, it could alert their entire network. That's our advantage." Now she was part of it, moving among the stars with humans who refused to be predictable. As they traveled, Jax taught Lysera how to think differently. "Look at the patterns," he said. "Not just what you see, but what's missing. Humans excel at noticing gaps. The Empire's AI might scan every channel, monitor every sensor, but it cannot anticipate what doesn't follow a pattern. That's our edge." They had noticed the missing device and dispatched enforcers to retrieve it. Jax's instincts, honed from years of unpredictable human thinking, guided them around patrols and detection systems. They relied not on strength or firepower, but on wit, timing, and improvisation. Every step reinforced the lesson. Humans could succeed where rigid hierarchies and perfect technology failed. In a small, hidden settlement on a fringe planet, they finally paused to rest. Lysera studied the device under Mara's guidance and Jax's careful supervision. Each discovery made her more aware of the delicate balance of power within the Empire. She realized that loyalty, courage, and intelligence were far more important than rank or tradition. And she began to understand the true value of humans, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they could adapt, improvise, and act with ingenuity when everything else failed. As night fell, the trio gathered outside their shelter, looking up at the stars. Lysera felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time, she was not a pawn of protocol or a figurehead in a rigid system. She was part of a team, part of something bigger, and she could make a difference. Jax placed a hand on her shoulder. "The next step is to understand exactly who wants this device and why. Humans have a saying, knowledge is power, and right now we have both the knowledge and the ability to act on it." She had crossed a threshold from tradition to action, from expectation to unpredictability. With Jax and Mara beside her, she knew that the future was uncertain, but that was exactly the point. Humans thrived in uncertainty. They saw opportunities where others saw risk. They acted boldly when others hesitated. The princess smiled faintly, realizing that one accidental knock on a human soldier's door had begun a chain of events that could reshape the galaxy. And as she looked out at the stars, she felt a sense of hope she had never known in the palace corridors. Humans, she realized, had a way of changing things, not through power or authority, but through courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to be predictable. And in that moment, she understood that the galaxy was about to change in ways no one could have foreseen. The small settlement on the fringe planet was quiet, almost peaceful, but danger lingered in the shadows. Jax, Lysera, and Mara had spent the previous day studying the device, tracing its signals and making careful notes. Each discovery revealed more about the Empire's vulnerabilities, and each revelation increased the urgency of their mission. The palace had begun searching for the device in earnest, and time was running out. Lysera had grown in confidence. Her royal training had taught her rules, patience, and diplomacy, but it was the humans who had taught her action, improvisation, and courage. She was learning that strength in the galaxy came not from rank or weapons alone, but from the ability to think differently and adapt. Watching Jax and Mara work together was like witnessing a machine that never stopped learning. Each human flaw turned into advantage, each unpredictable move a strategy the Empire would never anticipate. That evening, Jax called a meeting in the main room of their shelter. Mara had been gathering intelligence on potential allies, humans, aliens, and even sympathetic AIs who had grown weary of rigid palace control. "We can't do this alone," Jax said, his voice calm but commanding. "The palace has power, but they rely on rules. We rely on creativity. We need people who understand that success comes from thinking differently." "How do we find them?" "We'll start with the trade hubs. People here operate outside the Empire's rules every day. They know the risks of acting alone, but together they can be unstoppable." "And why we can make a difference?" Among this chaos, Jax moved like a predator stalking the patterns, observing, analyzing, and predicting. Lysera followed, her eyes wide, learning to see not just the movement of people but the gaps between them, the possibilities hidden in the disorder. Their first stop was a workshop run by an alien mechanic named Cairo, a slender, silver-scaled being with sharp eyes and nimble hands. Cairo had been repairing ships for years, often under the radar of the Empire. Jax approached carefully, explaining the situation without revealing the full extent of the device's power. Cairo listened, fingers drumming on a console. "If what you're saying is true," he said finally, "the palace has been overconfident. They assume control because they have technology, but they underestimate the value of improvisation and coordination. Humans, and now the princess, are a threat they never expected." Because it makes sense. The first challenge came sooner than expected. As they moved through the trade hub, a patrol of palace enforcers appeared, scanning for unusual activity. Jax motioned for them to hide among crates and market stalls. He whispered instructions to Lysera, teaching her how to blend in, how to observe without being seen, and how to anticipate patrol movements. They moved silently, and when the patrol passed, Jax led them down a narrow alley. Lysera's heart pounded, but she noticed something remarkable. Unlike the palace guards, whose movements were precise and predictable, humans, and those who thought like humans, did not follow patterns. By simply thinking in ways the enforcers could not predict, they avoided capture entirely. It was a small lesson, but one Lysera never forgot. Over the following days, the group expanded. They recruited an alien communications expert, a retired palace strategist who had grown disillusioned with rigid rules, and a small contingent of humans who had been living in hiding. Each new member added skill, knowledge, and creativity to the team. Together, they formed a shadow force capable of moving through the galaxy without alerting the Empire, yet strong enough to challenge it if necessary. Lysera watched them, learning from each one. She realized that true power did not come from commands or weapons alone, but from combining different strengths. The humans excelled at improvisation, the aliens at analysis, and the AIs at speed and calculation. Together, they became more than the sum of their parts. One evening, while analyzing the device, Jax discovered a hidden signal embedded deep within its circuits. "This is clever," he muttered. "Someone expected it to fall into the wrong hands." They put a failsafe here, a silent alarm to alert the palace if the device is tampered with. Then we need a plan that takes advantage of that, something no one could foresee. And together, we can use this to our advantage. Sensors and patrols monitored every route, and the group had to use every trick Jax had taught them. They traveled in small pods, using asteroid fields and nebulae as cover, exploiting the assumptions of the palace. Lysera learned to anticipate danger without fear, to act decisively, and to trust her instincts, a lesson taught not by textbooks but by human experience. Once on the planet, they moved quickly to the data center. Cairo and the communications expert bypassed security systems, Mara monitored external patrols, and Jax led Lysera through the corridors. Every step was calculated, yet adaptable. When an unexpected patrol appeared, Lysera improvised, creating a distraction that allowed the group to pass unnoticed. She felt a thrill unlike anything she had experienced in the palace: freedom, responsibility, and the knowledge that her actions mattered. Inside the data center, they accessed the network, uncovering evidence of the rogue general's plot. It was worse than they had feared. The generals had been manipulating palace AI systems to consolidate power, isolating the queen, and planning a coup that could destabilize the entire empire. The device Lysera carried was central to their plan, a tool that could either save the empire or allow the coup to succeed. Lysera realized the enormity of their task. Her people's lives, the stability of the empire, and the fate of countless worlds depended on their next actions. Yet she also understood that she was not alone. Humans, aliens, and AIs working together could achieve what the rigid empire could not. As they left the data center, Jax reminded her of an important lesson. Humans have always survived by adapting, by thinking differently, and by acting when others hesitate. The palace relies on rules. We rely on creativity. That's why we can win, even when the odds seem impossible. The human soldier had changed the way she saw the universe, and she knew that the next phase of their mission would test every skill she had gained. As they prepared to return to their hidden base, the group reflected on what they had learned. Each member had brought something unique: and together they had achieved what none could have accomplished alone. The rogue generals had underestimated humans, underestimated adaptability, and underestimated courage, and that mistake would give them the edge they needed. Lysera looked at Jax, who had been guiding them with calm confidence. "I understand now," she said. "Humans can change the outcome of battles, of entire empires, simply by refusing to act predictably. And they inspire others to see differently as well. And we have a choice: let it fall into chaos or shape it for the better." The princess, the soldier, and their allies were no longer pawns of the empire. They were architects of change. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the rogue generals were beginning to realize that the human element was not something they could predict, control, or ignore. The heart of the empire was unlike anything Lysera had ever seen. Towering spires of metal and crystal pierced the sky, gleaming under the twin suns of Zoria. The palace that had once seemed so distant now loomed as a fortress of technology and control. Every surface, every corridor, and every holographic display was designed to enforce order, to monitor, and to dominate. Princess Lysera felt a surge of apprehension, tempered only by the knowledge that she was no longer alone. Humans and their allies were with her now, unpredictable and determined, capable of seeing patterns the Empire had overlooked. Jax guided her through a discreet docking corridor, using a combination of forged credentials, altered signals, and simple human intuition to bypass automated security checks. The Empire's AI systems scanned every ship, every person, every device, but they were programmed for predictability. They did not anticipate improvisation, human creativity, or boldness. That was Jax's strength, and it was the strength Lysera was beginning to recognize in herself. They entered the palace under the guise of technicians sent to upgrade the AI control systems. Mara and Cairo followed, blending seamlessly into the alien staff, their movements confident but cautious. Lysera clutched the device tightly, aware that it was both a key and a target. One misstep could trigger alarms, alerting the rogue generals to their presence and placing the Empire, and themselves, in immediate danger. As they moved deeper into the control hub, Lysera observed the palace AI in action. Streams of data flowed endlessly across holographic panels, decisions were made in milliseconds, and the logic of the Empire seemed absolute. But Jax saw what Lysera could not: small gaps in reasoning, flaws in programming, and rigid assumptions that left the AI vulnerable. While the Empire relied on certainty, humans relied on creativity. While the AI followed logic, humans followed ingenuity. They reached the main control chamber, a vast room filled with towering holographic displays and glowing conduits. The rogue generals had installed their own security measures, anticipating attempts to bypass the AI. Jax scanned the room carefully. "They think they've covered everything," he whispered. "But they can't account for unpredictability. That's our advantage." He carefully connected the device, its circuits pulsing softly as it interfaced with the palace systems. The AI reacted instantly, sending warning signals through the network. A subtle alarm echoed across hidden channels, but it was too late. The device was already inside, analyzing the system, revealing patterns and exposing vulnerabilities. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the chamber. "Unauthorized access detected. Identify yourselves immediately." The holographic displays flickered, and an AI avatar materialized, its expression neutral but its voice firm. Lysera felt a shiver run down her spine. This was the embodiment of the Empire's intelligence, a being that had overseen countless decisions, wars, and political maneuvers. It was designed to be flawless, rational, and unstoppable. Jax stepped forward calmly. "We are here to correct a malfunction in the system," he said. His voice was steady, his demeanor confident. The AI scanned him, processing his words. Lysera noticed something remarkable. Despite its vast processing power, the AI struggled with his unpredictability. It expected obedience, compliance, and logic, but Jax offered none of those in the expected way. "You are human," the AI said. "Your reasoning is flawed. You cannot manipulate this system." The human beside her, who had started as a soldier on a small outpost, was now challenging the very intelligence that governed the Empire. His confidence was contagious. She realized that humans had a unique strength: courage combined with ingenuity, creativity combined with instinct. The AI began to counteract, rerouting power, sealing channels, and isolating the device. But Jax anticipated each move. He instructed Mara to reroute external communications, while Cairo adjusted the energy flow to maintain stability. Lysera, acting on intuition she had learned from Jax, manipulated the device to unlock hidden pathways, revealing parts of the system the generals had overlooked. Minutes felt like hours. The chamber buzzed with energy, data streams twisting and bending under their influence. The AI's voice grew more insistent. "You cannot succeed. You will be neutralized." That's how change happens. She had learned to trust Jax, to trust her instincts, and to act decisively. She input a sequence that activated a feedback loop in the rogue general's systems, exposing their manipulations and alerting the Queen's loyal aides. The AI absorbed the information, recognizing that the control it thought it had was compromised, but in a way that restored order rather than destruction. The rogue general's plan unraveled rapidly. Forces loyal to them were neutralized, communications intercepted, and the device's data revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. The Palace AI, guided by Lysera and Jax, began restoring systems to their proper function. Every movement was precise, every action calculated, but it was guided by human intuition as much as by algorithms. Lysera felt a thrill of empowerment. She had walked through corridors of power, hidden in plain sight, and acted where tradition had failed. She had learned that leadership was not about titles or fear, but about courage, creativity, and the willingness to take responsibility for decisions. Humans had taught her this lesson, and she had applied it at the Empire's very core. As the rogue generals attempted one last desperate move, Jax anticipated their actions. Using a combination of strategy, improvisation, and moral clarity, he guided Lysera and the team to neutralize their threat without unnecessary violence. The generals were captured, their communications severed, and their plots revealed to the Queen. The Empire was safe, not through brute force, but through intelligence, courage, and the human ability to see differently. Lysera turned to Jax, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes. "I understand now," she said. "The Empire relies on rules, on order, on expectation. Humans, your way of thinking has changed everything. It's people who refuse to be predictable, who see possibilities where others see walls, who act with courage and clarity. That's how the galaxy changes, and you've learned it too. Human intervention, unexpected yet effective, has restored balance." Jax guided the team back through the corridors, careful but confident. The device had served its purpose, exposing the vulnerabilities and ensuring the Empire's stability. Lysera walked beside him, no longer just a princess, but a leader capable of decisive thought, adaptability, and action. As they exited the control hub, Mara whispered, "You've changed more than just the system today. You've shown that even the most rigid empire can be challenged with intelligence, courage, and ingenuity. One human, one decision, one action, it can ripple across the stars. That's the power of thinking differently." The Palace AI, the rogue generals, and even centuries of tradition had underestimated the value of adaptability. She would not. She had learned to act when others hesitated, to see what others ignored, and to trust the human spirit in a way she had never imagined possible. As they prepared to leave the palace and report to the Queen, Lysera understood the profound truth of their mission. The galaxy would never be the same. One human soldier had shown her the path, and together, humans and their allies had demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and creativity were forces more powerful than fear, tradition, or rigid control. And in that realization, Lysera knew that the next steps would shape not just the Empire, but the entire galaxy, and that the lessons of unpredictability, ingenuity, and human spirit would guide them all. The twin suns rose over Zoria, casting long shadows across the palace spires. Princess Lysera stood at the balcony of the central tower, gazing at the city below. For the first time, she saw it not as a place of rules and hierarchy, but as a living, breathing system of possibilities, fragile yet full of potential. The rogue generals had been captured, the AI had been restored to its proper function, and the Empire had survived a threat that no one had expected. Yet the real work was just beginning. Jax stepped beside her, his expression calm but alert. He had seen countless battles, faced dangers that would have broken others, and yet he stood here, a human soldier whose ingenuity had changed the course of the Empire. "The palace is secure," he said, "but the galaxy doesn't stop. There are others who would take advantage of weakness. We have to think ahead." She had learned from Jax that leadership was not about reacting, but about anticipating, adapting, and guiding. The lessons of human courage, creativity, and unpredictability had become hers. She now understood that the strength of humans was not in raw power, but in their ability to improvise, to solve problems where others saw walls, and to act decisively when the stakes were highest. Their first step was to restore trust across the empire. Many officials had been manipulated by the rogue generals, following orders without question. Lysera and Jax traveled together through council chambers and administrative halls, speaking not as princess and soldier, but as leaders advocating transparency, creativity, and collaboration. Lysera found that humans had a unique way of inspiring others simply by acting differently, by refusing to accept things as they were. People began to listen, not because of fear or authority, but because of respect for ingenuity and courage. At the same time, Jax worked with Mara, Cairo, and the other allies they had gathered. Together, they implemented new communication networks, bypassing rigid protocols that had slowed decision-making in the past. Humans thrived in this environment, improvising solutions, adapting to unforeseen challenges, and turning each obstacle into an opportunity. Even the palace AI, once viewed as infallible, adapted under their guidance, learning from human creativity and acknowledging the value of flexible, nonlinear thinking. As days turned into weeks, the empire began to stabilize in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. The rogue general's loyalists were either reassigned or reintegrated under careful supervision, and trust slowly returned to the palace. Lysera discovered that leadership was not about commanding obedience, but about encouraging initiative. She began to rely not only on Jax, but on the diverse group of humans, aliens, and AIs who had joined their cause. Each brought unique skills, perspectives, and insights that no single individual could replicate. One evening, as Lysera and Jax walked through the quiet corridors of the palace, she spoke softly. "I used to believe that power came from control, from fear, from tradition, but now I see it differently. Leadership comes from courage, from innovation, and from the willingness to act when others hesitate. Humans have taught me that. You've learned to see what the palace could not, to act where they hesitated, and to trust in those who were underestimated." The princess realized that one accidental knock on a door, one encounter with a human soldier, had set in motion a series of events that would alter the empire forever. Their work was far from complete. While the rogue generals were neutralized, the galaxy beyond the empire's borders remained volatile. Other powers watched Zoria carefully, noting both its vulnerability and its resilience. Lysera knew that human ingenuity would continue to be essential, not just for survival, but for progress. Jax had shown her that the unexpected, the creative, and the bold could achieve what sheer authority could not. In the weeks that followed, Lysera began implementing reforms. She encouraged initiative at every level of the empire, rewarding those who proposed new solutions and innovative strategies. Humans and other species were placed in advisory positions, their perspectives valued not despite differences, but because of them. The rigid structures of the past began to evolve, allowing flexibility, creativity, and adaptability to flourish. Jax observed from the background, guiding, advising, and occasionally intervening when human experience was needed. He saw the fruits of their labor, a palace where ideas flowed freely, a council that debated solutions rather than following strict rules, and an empire that had learned to value ingenuity over blind obedience. Humans had changed the galaxy not through conquest, but through thought, courage, and action. One day, as Lysera reviewed reports from the outer colonies, she realized just how far their influence had spread. The Queen's loyalists had regained trust, rogue factions had been neutralized, and the empire was stronger, more resilient, and more adaptable than ever before. And at the center of it all was the lesson Jax had taught her, that humans could change outcomes not by force alone, but by refusing to be predictable, by acting with ingenuity, and by trusting in their ability to adapt. Lysera turned to Jax, a smile of genuine admiration on her face. "You've changed more than just the palace, Jax. You've changed me, and through me, you've changed the empire." Other planets and systems began to recognize the value of human creativity and adaptability. Humans were no longer seen as simple soldiers or minor players. They were innovators, problem solvers, and catalysts of change. Lysera saw this as a turning point for the galaxy, a recognition that strength was not measured only by technology or rank, but by the ability to think differently and act decisively. Jax and Lysera continued to work together, planning for the future, reinforcing alliances, and training others in the principles of human ingenuity. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges, but they faced it with confidence. They had seen firsthand how courage, intelligence, and creativity could overcome even the most rigid systems. One evening, as the twin suns set over Zoria, casting golden light across the palace, Lysera stood with Jax on the balcony. She watched as citizens moved through the city, free from fear and inspired by new possibilities. She realized that one accidental knock on a door had sparked a revolution of thought, courage, and action. A human soldier had changed the course of the empire, not through violence, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and moral clarity. "The galaxy is different now," Lysera said softly. "And it's because humans refuse to act like everyone expected. And that difference has reshaped the empire, saved the queen, and opened a path to a future where creativity and courage matter more than tradition and fear." And at the center of it all was the lesson she had learned from humans, that the unexpected, the courageous, and the innovative could accomplish what no rigid system could. Jax placed a hand on her shoulder. "The galaxy is still full of challenges," he said, "but humans have shown and you've learned that we can face them. One action can ripple across the stars. One decision can change the future." And as she stood beside Jax, she knew that this was only the beginning. The Empire was ready for a new era, guided by leaders who understood the power of human ingenuity and the importance of acting boldly. Lysera felt a sense of pride, not in herself alone, but in the humans who had taught her, inspired her, and shown her that one individual could make a difference that rippled across the galaxy. For the first time in her life, Lysera understood the true meaning of leadership, courage, and change. And as the stars twinkled above, she knew that the galaxy was ready to be shaped by those who dared to act differently, think creatively, and trust in the human spirit. And so, one human soldier, a princess who had knocked on the wrong door, and a group of unlikely allies had altered the course of history. The galaxy had been reminded that power is not only measured by technology or rank, but by ingenuity, courage, and the will to act when the moment demands it. Humans had shown the universe their true strength, and the Empire would never forget it.